We're thrilled to be joined now by Liam Hughes, co-director of Destination NBA, a G League Odyssey, which premieres August 8th on Prime Video. Liam, thank you so much for coming on the Just Basketball Show.
Thanks for having me, guys. Happy to be here.
So let Brendon, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I mean, what I really want to know is just jumping off, like we had a chance to watch the doc and we're basketball nerds, and even just any Hoops fan's going to recognize a lot of the people, whether it's Scoot Henderson, who just got drafted 3rd overall, or the names and faces of alumni of the G League, or even some of the guys that might be kind of, I remember them from college and everything else. But what I'm curious to start off is just what your connection was to the G League, what your relationship was to the league and to the players in it kind of before the project, and then maybe what you learned or the biggest thing you came away thinking differently about with this group of guys and just the kind of organization of everything down there after finishing the project.
Yeah. Well, it's an easy answer in a lot of ways. I didn't have one. I didn't know much about the G League at all. I'm an NBA fan myself. I'm from the Bay Area, so shout out Warriors. But I didn't know much about the G League at all. And I think, honestly, that was a big part of the NBA's desire to do this project. The G League has been growing so much in terms of its quality, its reach, how connected it is to the NBA. But I don't think that people know about it. You know, it's like it's one of those things where the quality and the size of the league has grown, but the knowledge about it and the access hasn't. And I think that was a big part of the reason that the NBA wanted to do this project. They felt like it was time for this league to get some shine. And we agreed, you know, once we started looking into it, the level of player that's there, like you said, the different types of players. The G League is now an alternative path to the NBA. You mentioned Scoot Henderson. It's a place where it is the premier place now where guys go that don't get drafted to the NBA, that classic path to the NBA, if you will. It is the premier place for guys to prove themselves, to test themselves, to develop as players, and to make it to the NBA. And so we learned that pretty quickly. And then we started thinking about, okay, like what are the different archetypes of players that are in this league that we're seeing? You have your young phenoms like Scoot Henderson. You have your ex-college standouts like Denzel Valentine. You have your hidden gems like Gabe York. And we really started to think about these different archetypes and the different type of guys that we were going to meet in the G League. And that's how we built our cast of subjects, if you will, was we really wanted to give a broad feeling for the type of guy that's playing in the G League.
When you get approached to do this, you guys take this on and you're saying, okay, I need to teach myself about this. I need to learn about this before I start maybe diving in. What was the process like of learning about this and learning about the G League and learning about what you were really diving into with this project?
Great question. I think that it began with, you know, your kind of G League 101 education, right? I had no idea that there were so many teams. This past season, there were 28 teams, 28 affiliated teams of 30 NBA teams. This year, it will be 29 because the Portland Trailblazers just added their team, Rip City. The G League Ignite is an independent team run by the NBA. And then the Mexico City Capitanes are the first professional Mexican sports team to compete full-time in an American league. And all you had to do is tell me that. And I was like, whoa, okay. So let's go see a bit more about this. And I think that like the biggest thing that jumped out to me was how connected the leagues have become. I think the most obvious way is with the two-way contracts, that now every NBA team has two-way contracts, players that can play for both the NBA team and the G League affiliate. And also just how connected the teams are becoming. The Maine Celtics and the Boston Celtics, for example. Denzel Valentine talked a lot about how he did, you know, he started with Boston preseason on E10, ended up with the Maine Celtics. And he's like, dude, organizationally across the board, we're doing things the same way in Maine as they're doing in Boston. And that's more and more common now. The NBA teams are looking at their G League teams as a place where we can develop players, we can develop coaches, and we can develop them to play in the system that we play in our NBA team. So if a player comes up here, they're not behind the count, they're not behind the 8 ball. They know how we do things. They know what's expected of them because we run things the same over the course of our whole organization. So that was really interesting to see. You know, this is a professional league, and when we talked to some of the guys, Spencer Dinwiddie, Seth Curry, guys who were in the G League when it was the D League, they were like, let me tell you something, right? This league has come a long way. So I think that became our second level. So that became my second level of education, was talking to the guys who were there, 10 years ago, and what it looked like then versus what it looks like now. That's when it starts to become clear just how far this league has come.
One of the things for me in the doc that really stood out was how you guys blended a bunch of different backgrounds. You mentioned Denzel. There's someone in Mexico City. You have a player trying to become the first Orthodox Jewish player to play in the NBA. You have Scoot Henderson, who's this budding superstar. So what was it like trying to blend all these different stories from these very different backgrounds into one documentary, into one narrative, so to speak?
It was a challenge, one narrative with a limited amount of time, right? It started with kind of the structure. We knew we wanted to check in with each guy. We needed to introduce each guy. We wanted to check in with them throughout the season. But, in some ways, there was no rhyme or reason to how we bounced between the players. It was really about developing their individual story arcs and then finding, what we really wanted to do was link these guys, right? We wanted to connect them through their common goal and their shared love of basketball, because they all have such different stories, they all have such different backgrounds, but they all have the same goal, which is to make it to the NBA. And that story plays out in the same place for all of them, which is on the basketball court. So what our big goal was to connect them through that shared goal and on the basketball court. So there are some instances where we were able to kind of transition between guys on the court. You saw that a lot more in kind of Act 1 when we were setting it up. So we really wanted to communicate that these guys are all on their own journeys, but they're also on the same journey, right? They all have the same destination in mind. They all have the same goal. And achieving that goal and reaching that promised land requires a lot of the same things, right? Commitment, resiliency, not giving up, obviously high skill level, continuing to develop. The same things are required of all of them to reach that place, but they all have such different and unique journeys in getting there. And I think that's what's so fascinating.
I have another question for you, but we actually have a surprise additional guest here, which is Bryant Robinson, the additional co-director of the wonderful documentary that we're discussing here, and one-upping all of us in terms of background. We were talking about yours, Liam, before we hit record, and Bryant is just outpacing all of us with that greenery and blue sky behind. We lost him momentarily, but I want to jump in, and he'll be back in a second. I want to just ask you, either of you guys, if Bryant, you want to jump in, it really hit me in the part where you hear different guys. I think somebody's getting stretched out or rolled out on the training table, and he jokes about, throws the Giannis quote out there, and he's like, you got to, want to be the greatest to be the greatest, or something along those lines. And having spent a little bit of time around G League guys, and you kind of hear that, and it's as much as that was a joke, you do kind of catch that dynamic of they're speaking about the NBA and in kind of this aspirational way, and they feel that proximity to it, but you also in the doc I think did a great job of it's just out of reach, or they're always kind of it's one stair step away. I'm sure it jumped out to you guys when you started to interview these folks too, but how did you go about trying to capture that dynamic with the way that you structured things, or just kind of the moments you chose to capture from their personal lives and those behind the scenes things to kind of paint that picture of where they are in their careers and what this unique league is? Because it's not like the baseball minor leagues where it's you're on your way to something no matter what. These guys, it is a big question of whether they'll get there.
That's a great clip.
Yeah, I mean, I think
the clip that you're referring to is I think was said by Mason Jones,
Yeah.
Who's actually one of my favorite characters in the movie. He's, very polarizing, for lack of better words. He speaks his mind. He's never scared to say exactly how he feels, and that's why he was one of my favorite characters of the movie. I don't even know if I should say that. I mean, obviously we have Scoot, we have so many great guys. Denzel, love them all for their own reasons, but to answer your question, you just really have to form this relationship with these guys where they feel like they can trust you to even speak their minds. I think it just starts with trust, finding out ways to allow these guys to just be themselves. Being on the court and being one of the best players in the G League is one aspect of things for these guys. They're used to cameras on the court, but having cameras in their bedrooms and having cameras in their living rooms is like a whole nother story. Like imagine if we put a camera in your bedroom or in your story when you're exhausted, you just played the hardest game of the season so far, and now we have a camera in your room. You might want us to get out of there. You're right. Let alone talk about how you feel and how far you might feel from the NBA, or how the game didn't go the way that you expected it to go. So I think it just starts with trust. Liam, I'm sure you have a lot to say there too about that question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, trust is everything, right? Trust is definitely everything when we're trying to get these guys to open up. I'll take a slightly different angle on the answer, though. Thinking about that moment, I think what he says is it's lonely at the top, right? But I think that it's a lonely journey for all these guys, and I think that that's something I definitely noticed, is that they're all fighting in the same arena. They're all fighting for the same goal. But it is really lonely. And I think especially in the G League, one thing we talked a lot about, and Gabe York, was very honest about it in the film, is that you're competing against your teammates in the G League, right? Like a G League title, they won't say no to it, but that's not the goal, right? You go into a G League season as a G Leaguer, your goal is to get an NBA contract and get to the NBA. And that's the goal of every guy on the team. So you're playing together. You're trying to beat the other team. You're trying to win the championship, but you're also competing against your teammates to be the one who gets the 2-way or the 10-day. So it's kind of like, it's very lonely, I think, for these guys. Someone like Scoot, with the amount of attention that he gets at 18, like nobody can relate to that. It's lonely. And I think that that's in some ways what Mason was getting at in that moment, obviously in a very Mason way. But that was something that I really wanted us to capture it. And in general with professional athletes, like it's something that's glamorized from the outside, but once you get inside of it, it's really not that glamorous a lot of times. It's really hard work. It's a really tough mental struggle day to day. And that's something that I think is super important to portray in these sports docs.
Yeah, I liked it. I mean, I think too, the longer shots and the darker kind of lighting and everything, I could feel that was kind of what was trying to come across. I mean, the thing you talked about Mason and liking him as a character, the line that jumped out to me the most from this standpoint was also his, which was the honesty about being on the Rockets that first year and feeling like wanting to get better and almost like asking too many questions and like pushing too hard was what like cost him that shot. That was kind of crazy because you would just think like that's what a coach would want. I could totally imagine being in his shoes and being like, let me go ask coach what I need to work on, or let me kind of get to the front of the line for this drill or whatever. And then to hear him kind of say like, I think that was the problem. Like that just hit me. I mean, I don't know if you guys have any specific thoughts, but I just, it was impactful to me.
I feel like these documentaries are therapeutic for these athletes, to some degree. So I feel like what I'd be interested in the most after this is that, after this movie comes out on August 8th, is I'd love to watch it with these guys and see how they receive the film themselves, because to your point of, Mason says that he asked too many questions. Like, what does that actually mean? And that's something that I think Liam and I both wrestled with. Like, what does that actually mean? And I think over time, and being able to spend more time with Mason, I think what I'll speak for myself. Like what I personally realized was that what I think that means is that maybe he was a little bit actually more of a hothead and than he should have been about the things that he wanted to get out of the NBA. These guys who are coming from the G League and entering the NBA are they're coming with this level of aggression and they've worked so hard that once they get there, they're kind of anxious. They want to stay there, one thing that I realized about Mason, one thing I picked up about him is that he's so passionate that sometimes that passion actually translates into, he can easily come off as too aggressive. And I think I would imagine, and I could be wrong, but I could imagine him asking some of these questions to his coach in a very overly passionate way, and maybe that has a little bit more to do with it. But I don't know, man. Your question is actually why I'm so excited about this movie to come out. I want to see how these guys receive the film, and hopefully we get a season part two to this entire movie, because I love to just continue to understand and explore these characters' minds and get deeper and deeper with them. We spent 6 or 7 months with these guys. It's very hard to get extremely deep with someone in that short amount of time. I think we did a really great job with revealing a lot of layers to these guys, but there's always more work to be done. So that's my answer to that one.
No, I think that's great. I mean, I would love it if we could. I mean, the same guys, new guys. Like, I even think of Chris being based in Cleveland and Imani Bates, somebody like that who is going to probably be starting their career. There's so many different types of career checkpoints that happen in the G League. But I wanted to ask you about Scoot Henderson, because I'm sure a lot of NBA fans will be tuning in to hear and see more about him. He's somebody who's going to get a lot more admirers as his career begins this year in Portland. What's something you saw just being around Scoot that might not be obvious to the average NBA fan who's just getting to know him, or maybe just heard of him in June for the first time?
But so let's just start with a photo of Scoot Henderson. What does he look like? He looks like a god of an athlete. This guy's huge. I mean, at least to me. When I'm standing next to this guy, even in person, I just look at him and I think, wow, this guy is. I'm looking at a 36-year-old man who's just been lifting weights his whole life. But then you meet him and you speak to him and you listen to him and you really get pulled back to reality, which is that this guy is 18, 19 years old. And I think that's something that comes across in the film. You really get to see how, at the end of the day, outside of all the cameras, lights, and action around this guy, he's just a kid, and he's coming into himself as a man, and I think that's something that people just wouldn't be able to get unless they saw the film or unless they were friends with Scoot. You wouldn't be able to understand that he has this very pure, innocent child, younger personality and way of seeing things, and there's a lot of things that are still foreign and new to him. He's obviously a superstar and he's built and he's ready for the league, but things like finding his voice and leadership are things that I think that he's continuing to develop.
Yeah.
Well,
and I would say another thing that really jumped out for me about Scoot is just how important his family is to him and his success and his growth. And I think across the board with these guys, the support systems they have are so important. We meet Gabe's girlfriend in the series. We meet Ryan Terrell's family. We meet Scoot's family, Mason's girlfriend. I mean, all these guys really rely on their support networks, and I think that's especially true of Scoot and his family. I mean, if you watch the draft, you saw them doing a photo. The Henderson 7, they have a sign for the 7 kids and stuff. They're so deeply connected. And obviously his dad was a big part of training him growing up, and that's so important to them. And then I think the other thing that I would say, and this kind of ties back to your last question as well, is a common theme that comes up again and again is these guys, they all say, control what you can control, control what you can control. I'm just going to control what I can control. And I think that's for a guy like Scoot, who has such high expectations, right, awaiting him, the weight of the world on his shoulders as he enters adulthood at the ripe age of 18. Like, that is, it's an incredible amount of pressure. But I think that mindset of I'm just going to control what I can control, which is get up, go to the gym, train, listen to my coaches, take care of my nutrition, take care of my health, go to bed, wake up, repeat. Like, that's so important to his mentality. And I think so important to a lot of these guys. And I think was a big part of Mason's lesson, right? Again, tying back to what we were talking about earlier. Like, he's like, control what you can control. Now, that's what I've learned is don't ask questions, work hard and prove it. It's like actions speak louder than words, right? It kind of comes back to that. So, but Scoot is so impressive. He's just such an impressive young man.
He is.
Yeah. Let's end on one last question. Was there something in this documentary from either of you that didn't make the final cut that you wish would have, that is stuck in your brain for whatever reason? Is there something that ended up on the cutting room floor that has stuck with you, even if maybe the viewer is not going to get to see that in the final product?
Yeah, there. I can go first. I won't say the exact line of what. Liam, you go first.
I think that for me,
there's so many things that I can think of. So I want to hear Liam, what you think first.
Well, I think that I think that I'll give it's kind of a broad answer, but our biggest challenge was kind of narrowing down the field here, in terms of how many guys we were able to feature, and what we ended up doing, is we have our five main guys, and then each of them kind of has an ancillary subject, as we were calling it, that helps us better understand the main subject journey, right? So whether that's Ryan Terrell's parents, who kind of represent his higher purpose and helped us understand his impact in the Orthodox Jewish community, whether it was Trevlin Queen for Gabe, who kind of represents the guy who he's competing with, whether it was Pooh being the mentor and mentee relationship with Scoot. But we have so much more content with Pooh, with Fiondu Kabengele in Maine, with Trevlin Queen, with Pooh Jetter, that we just didn't have space for, So I think really that would be my answer, is like, it's whole characters that I really wish we could have dug into more, because I mean, you see how amazing these five guys' stories are. We could have done that with four more guys, So
I think
it's like,
Pooh
I think
could
that
have
was,
a documentary about him by himself.
Yeah.
Pooh is you said character as like a movie character, but Pooh is a character like a person character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you, Bryant?
Okay, so there's a scene with Fee Kabengele when he's sitting in his hotel room, and his hotel room is essentially his apartment room is essentially a small hotel room. And if you know anything about Fee Kabengele, you know that this guy is a giant of a human.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly how tall he is, but we can look it up. But he's extremely tall. He's extremely wide. We're spending some time with him in his room, and he's sitting on this couch, and he's making this like long couch look like a foldable armchair. That's how big this guy is. And when he stands up, when he stands up, I kid you not, he's about 3 inches away from his head is 3 inches away from touching the ceiling of his room. And we're all in this room. Some of us get out of the room because it's not a lot of space, not a lot of oxygen in this room, and we're trying to like save it so that we can actually like film this good, competent interview, without sweating profusely and without having to like cut it short because of lack of oxygen, literally. And I asked him about this room, and I'm expecting him to complain about this room and talk about how he just can't wait to get out of it so that he can get into the NBA and make all this money and buy this mansion and buy this house, buy these cars and all this stuff. So I asked him about the room, and he looks at me, and with the biggest smile on his face, he goes, "I love it here. I love it. I love it here." I'm like, "What? Why do you love it here? Like we're in hell." And he's like, no, we're not actually. He goes, the reason why I love it here is because no matter how far I get in life, this being in this room is always going to ground me, and it's always going to remind me of how far I've come. And I'm always going to look back to this moment where I was an inch away from the ceiling, and I'm going to just be thankful. And it just reminds me that the grind never stops. And no matter how far I get, there's always going to be someone like me in this room grinding just as hard as I thought I needed to grind to be wherever I get to. So I need to remember that so that I always have that motivation to continue to grind as hard as I possibly can. And just his perspective on this room. I mean, I wish I could send you a photo of how small this room was. It just blew me away. And that, that basically shows you guys just how great this film, whoever's reading or listening, that basically shows you how great of a film this actually is, because if that scene got left on the cutting room floor, like, just imagine what's actually in the movie.
Yeah. Well, guys,
I'll give you a fun one as well.
Yeah.
I'll give you a fun one as well.
Yeah.
There was one moment where we were talking to Scoot, and he was saying something to his mom about maybe something that the first lady had said, and she goes, no politics, bro. Come on, no politics. And we ended up leaving that one on the cutting room floor, but I just thought that was kind of funny, like knowing the minefield that this kid is walking into as just a famous professional athlete. To hear his mom be like, hey, let's not talk about
don't
politics.
even say the word first lady. Yeah, exactly.
Let's just avoid all of that. Yeah. I'm gonna ask you off air what I think that might have been about, and we'll see if I'm right or not. All right, thank you guys so much for coming on. I have a guess based. There's a basketball related thing to that I have a guess of what that might have been, but I don't know when you guys were working on this, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But again, you guys can check out Destination NBA, a G League Odyssey, directed by these two wonderful gentlemen. It premieres on Prime Video on August 8th. Thank you guys so much for coming on the Just Basketball Show to talk all about it.
Thanks for having us.